video has been released showing Chinese soldiers crying as they're allegedly being transported to the disputed border between India and China. A police officer with the NYPD has been charged as acting as a Chinese spy who was allegedly targeting Tibetan immigrants in New York. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party is looking to push back against Trump's ban on the sale of chips to telecom company Huawei. I'll be going in depth into this. Welcome back, everyone. First off, some breaking news. The New York Post published an exclusive story about findings of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which allegedly declared that had the Chinese Communist Party not covered up the severity of the CCP virus outbreak, it may have prevented the pandemic. President Donald Trump was asked about the story during an interview with Fox and Friends, where he stated this.
I say it every time I speak, Brian. I'm angry at them because they could have stopped this. They could have stopped it easily. They stopped it from going back further into their country, but they didn't stop it from going out to the rest of the world, of which we're a part. They didn't stop it from coming here in Europe and all over the world, 188 countries to be exact. They did not stop it. Countries are devastated.
Trump was also asked about a Reuters report about a video released by the Chinese Air Force where it depicted nuclear-armed bombers carrying out simulated attacks on a U.S. Air Force base in Guam. Trump said, quote, "Well, I won't be telling you that. They know they've got some big problems, okay? If they play around, if they want to play the game, they've got a big problem." Now, that video was released on September 19th by the CCP's People's Liberation Army Air Force as the regime carried out its second day of military drills near Taiwan. And that move was seen as the CCP making a threat against the United States for having a diplomatic visit in Taiwan. Now, in addition to this, in addition to publishing its propaganda depicting the CCP military bombing a U.S. military base on Guam, which is also U.S. territory, it was also found soon after that the Chinese military pirated parts of that video from 3 different American movies. This included clips pirated from the Transformers film Revenge of the Fallen, The Hurt Locker, and The Rock. Now, this was seen as a blow to the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, that even their propaganda, even their military propaganda, depends on stealing from the United States. And again, with their military itself, they're often accused of stealing technology from the U.S. to build up their military. Here we see this even applies to their propaganda. Now, meanwhile, along the border between China and India, a video has been released showing Chinese soldiers crying as they're allegedly being transported to the disputed border. The video was initially posted on Chinese social media app WeChat, but was deleted soon after. Now, there are ongoing reports about the poor temperament and level of maturity of Chinese soldiers. A lot of criticisms on this go to the one-child policy, which is blamed in China for creating a generation that is spoiled and weak. You see Chinese officials and Chinese Communist Party soldiers crying, being weak, having poor temperament, not being able to deal with hardship because they grew up pampered and spoiled. And meanwhile, there are ongoing lockdowns in China around the spread of the CCP virus. In Shanxi, China, all students at the Xi'an International Studies University were locked in their school under the narrative of preventing the spread of the virus. The students are being forbidden from going out without having a valid reason, and they can only get food deliveries and other supplies through delivery. Now, similar lockdowns in schools were also made in Beijing and in Henan in China. And in these cases as well, students are forbidden from going out. And the measures have also caused prices of commodities at the school to soar, because again, you have demand going up. Videos show that in the middle of the night, students can be heard in their dorm shouting loudly and crying for freedom. So again, in China, this virus outbreak. Now, we talk about the second wave outbreak. Now, that's just kind of going along with trying to explain what's happening there. But in reality, the virus outbreak, the first wave in China, still has not ended. It never ended. When the Chinese Communist Party declared that the virus had ended, that was under the assessment that their economy was failing. Their economy was at risk of collapse. They had this narrative of opening up, saying the virus is over. One day after they were saying it's the biggest problem in the country. It went from being the biggest problem the CCP was facing, this virus outbreak in China, to being over in a single day after the Chinese Communist Party assessed again that their economy was about to collapse. And here we see again the CCP is having lockdown measures in many parts of China, while at the same time trying to tell the rest of the world that it's over in China. And now related to this, there's a major case in China. The CCP sent a message in this court case that criticizing the regime's handling of the virus can result in lengthy prison terms, and that even high-level officials in China are not safe from this. A Chinese tycoon was sentenced to 18 years in prison and has been fined around $620,000. He was charged, technically, for embezzling public funds, accepting bribes, and abusing power from his position at a state-run Chinese company. But the case and Ren Zhiqiang's heavy sentence are being interpreted as being meant to send a message to CCP members that criticizing or defying party leader Xi Jinping will not be tolerated. Mr. Ren had published an essay saying he saw the country's leader, meaning Xi Jinping, as a power-hungry clown. And soon after his essay was published, he was disappeared, before re-emerging when he faced official charges. Now, what's really going on here? Nearly all CCP leaders and top business leaders engage in some form of corruption. It's almost unheard of when you're dealing with high-level CCP officials. When it comes to the basic ways of doing business in China, they have this you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours way of doing business. You have to get engaged in these things to some extent. When they are facing charges, almost always in almost every single case, there's something deeper involved. Because if they wanted to go after real corruption in the country, almost no person within the CCP leadership or its top business community would be safe from it. This is again a political charge. It's being interpreted like this in China. Again, in context of his letter criticizing Xi Jinping and criticizing the CCP's handling of the virus. This is sending a message to top CCP leaders. You are not allowed to question Xi. You are not allowed to question Communist Party policy. And also when it comes to the virus, you are not allowed to question what the CCP is doing in order to allegedly control it. This is a message being sent in China that even top-level leaders, again, are not safe from policies like this. And meanwhile, in the United States, a police officer with the NYPD has been charged as acting as a Chinese spy and was allegedly targeting Tibetan immigrants in New York. The officer, Baim Adajie Angwang, is ethnically Tibetan and has been granted asylum in the United States after overstaying his visa and claimed that he had been arrested and tortured in China, partly because of being Tibetan. He's now being accused of having traveled back to China on numerous occasions, despite claiming asylum here, meaning that he was not safe to go back to China. And he was allegedly also working for the Chinese Communist Party to locate potential intelligence sources and to identify potential threats. Now, what's really interesting with this is the court documents include transcripts where this NYPD officer asks permission from the CCP to accept an interview with NTD TV, sister media of the Epoch Times. That was while he was claiming to be a Tibetan human rights dissident. Now, the court paper shows an official with the Chinese regime telling him that doing interviews with NTD was, quote, too much of a risk. The CCP official stated, quote, the cost is too high, and said, quote, because NTD, China is totally against it. The official also stated that being interviewed with NTD could have, quote, enormous impact if he planned to travel back to China. And he also revealed that everyone at NTD is on the Chinese Communist Party's blacklist. Now let me be clear, Crossroads is aired on NTD. NTD is a sister media of the Epoch Times. And with that said, I wear being blacklisted by the CCP as a badge of honor, because this means we have never compromised our integrity when it comes to standing up against the CCP. Its requirements on censorship, we have never folded to these things. Being blacklisted by the CCP for taking that stance, for not compromising our values, this is a badge of honor, something I wear proudly. Now also this officer, again, he was spying on dissidents in the United States. He was spying on Tibetans. Now the CCP, it's been revealed many times in the past, has programs run through its consulates to monitor people in overseas communities who are Tibetans, Falun Gong practitioners, and Muslim Uyghurs. To monitor anybody who challenges the interests of the CCP, who speaks out against its abuses. Now this individual is monitoring the Tibetan community in New York, In Australia, for example, an individual defected from the consulate there, and he revealed, this was Chen Yonglin, he revealed that part of his job was to monitor Falun Gong practitioners. In Canada, there was another case. An individual revealed that he was taken in by the CCP and he was asked by them to spy on Muslim Uyghurs. The Chinese Communist Party uses its consulates, as the story reveals, as hubs of espionage against overseas Chinese who have escaped human rights abuses in China. And again, we see here the CCP coordinating these operations through its consulates. And now for the broader stories for today. Now, first off, the Chinese Communist Party is looking to push back against the Trump ban on the sale of chips to telecom company Huawei, which dealt a heavy blow to the CCP's high-tech ambitions. The CCP is looking to build up its own domestic capabilities to manufacture chips, and it set aside $1.4 trillion for technology investments. It'll be holding a meeting on this move in October. Yet already doubts are surfacing on whether the investments can help the CCP break through in chip manufacturing. A video has been circulating on the Chinese internet where Huawei founder Ren Zhiqiang explains that the CCP often spends money to build roads, bridges, houses, and to develop its electronic industry. But while it has gotten used to this method, chips cannot be produced just by spending money. This follows news that the CCP's programs to develop chips domestically are already falling apart. It invests around 120 billion yuan to develop next-generation chips, and even poached around 100 engineers from Taiwan's TSMC chip manufacturer for that project. Yet even despite this, the program has been halted, and it's been deemed a scam even in China. Reports in China are accusing its state-run chip manufacturer HSMC of lying to the Chinese government. Now, videos in China show the unfinished construction projects, which now looks like an abandoned ruin. I can show you some videos of that.
就比较矮一点，可以看到里面的一个情况，里面已经杂草丛生啊。看红星资金链的一个断裂，就面临一个烂尾的一个危机。
And what are we seeing here? There have been major setbacks in the CCP's domestic chip manufacturing plans, and its different projects, these contingency plans for dealing with the potential ban of the sale of chips to companies like Huawei, these are all falling apart. The Chinese Communist Party for a long time has been trying to develop these capabilities internally in China. And again, they've been importing these chips from Taiwan, from South Korea, and from elsewhere, mainly Taiwan and South Korea. Now, these chips are not easy to make, as the CCP is now finding. It requires high-tech equipment to manufacture them, and those have been restricted to be sold to China as well. So building them is not a simple process. And for the CCP, this is a major blow. Why is this? It's because if you want to build modern generation technology, you need current generation chips, or even next-gen chips. As I mentioned before, if you think about the generations in smartphones, a couple years makes a big difference. If the CCP is manufacturing, say, phones that are iPhone 5 generation, say 5-6 years ago, then they're dealing with phones that can't compete on the global market. A few generations makes a huge, huge difference. And so the CCP's ability to compete in the international market is taking a huge blow from this. Meanwhile, the U.S. has held another high-level meeting with Taiwanese officials, again breaking conventions used by the CCP to try to prevent other countries from recognizing Taiwan as an independent country. U.S. Undersecretary for Economic Affairs Keith Krach arrived in Taiwan on September 17th for a 3-day visit, which Japan Times notes makes him the most senior State Department official to visit Taiwan in around 40 years. This follows another recent diplomatic visit from the U.S. by Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar. Now, during the recent visit, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen pledged deeper ties with the United States. Now, during this meeting, the Chinese Communist Party sent 18 fighter jets to harry Taiwan. Under the excuse of combat drills, it announced on September 18th, on the second day of the U.S. visit. Taiwan scrambled its air force to respond to that. Now, interestingly, joining a banquet with Keith Krach and Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen was another guest that would equally anger the CCP. That was TSMC founder Morris Chang, the head of the world's largest chip manufacturer, which is following the U.S. ban on selling chips to Chinese telecom company Huawei. And as another blow to the CCP, TSMC is planning to build a $12 billion factory in Arizona. Now, this seems to align with reports from Reuters back in May. Keith Krach told the publication that the Trump administration was looking to, quote, turbocharge an initiative to reduce U.S. reliance on China for its supply chains. It also cited an official allegedly familiar with the U.S. plans, stating the Trump administration was looking to remove its global industrial supply chains from China, and that this goes hand in hand with its use of tariffs to punish the CCP for its handling and the cover-up of the CCP virus pandemic. And the Chinese Communist Party's response to this move is only helping solidify concerns over its increasing hostilities to the United States and to Taiwan. According to Reuters, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen said during a September 20th press conference right after this visit that the CCP's actions demonstrate its threats to Taiwan. She stated, quote, "I believe these activities are no help to China's international image, and what's more, have put Taiwan's people even more on their guard, understanding even better the true nature of the Chinese communist regime." She stated this:
"It is time for like-minded countries and democratic friends in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond to discuss a framework to generate sustained and concerted efforts to maintain a strategic order that deters unilateral aggressive actions."
And this happens as well and also solidifies the justification for the Trump administration preparing to sell Taiwan defense equipment, potentially including surveillance drones, mobile artillery systems, anti-ship missiles, undersea mines, air-to-ground missiles, and other weapons. Now, what are we seeing here? The United States is increasingly supporting Taiwan, not just with the defense, not just in terms of standing up for Taiwan if the CCP tries to forcibly take it, which they've been threatening to do for a long time now, and they've even been ramping up those threats recently. Even more than this, the U.S. is beginning to engage with Taiwan diplomatically, which is one of the major things the Chinese Communist Party has been trying to prevent from happening. Now, when it comes to the Chinese Communist Party and Taiwan, Taiwan used to be recognized as the official government in exile of China. The CCP was seen as the illegitimate government, but that shifted again first under the United Nations, then under the U.S. Countries had to recognize the CCP's One China policy, which basically says if you recognize Taiwan as an independent country, not under Chinese Communist Party rule, then you were going against the CCP's interests, and the CCP will retaliate against you. Now, as the U.S. is signaling it's recognizing Taiwan, the CCP is showing signs of retaliating just like it threatens to do, but it seems to no longer have the authority to do so. And this is big. This undermines the authority of the Chinese Communist Party. The CCP views this as a threat to its own legitimacy as the official government of China. And if the United States recognizes Taiwan again, as it once did, as the government of China, this is a massive blow to the CCP. We'll see how far they take it with this, of course. But this also does something big, which is it opens the door to Taiwan engaging with other countries as well. It legitimizes Taiwan on the global stage. So the U.S. engaging with it like this opens its door for other countries. And we'll have to see how that goes moving forward as well. Now, on this note, Congressman Tom Tiffany introduced a bill on September 17th for the United States to end any recognition of the One China policy and to also resume normal ties with Taiwan. Tiffany stated, quote, "For more than 40 years, American presidents of both political parties have repeated Beijing's bogus lie that Taiwan is part of Communist China, despite the objective reality that it is not. It is long past time that America consigned the One China policy to the dustbin of history." The Democrats have also removed the recognition of the One China policy from their official policy, in a move that has likewise angered the CCP. This is no longer a partisan issue. And in response to these shifts, the Chinese Communist Party criticized the United States in its English mouthpiece news outlet, China Daily. It published the headline stating that, quote, Washington playing Taiwan card is selfish, reckless, and futile. Now again, what are we seeing here? Recognizing Taiwan, breaking away from the one China policy, this is no longer a partisan issue. And it's no longer just a U.S. policy issue as well. We see now different countries starting to recognize Taiwan as well, including Japan to some extent, including Australia to some extent, including India to some extent, under this new Quad alliance. Now, how this will go moving forward, we'll have to see. But this is something that massively angers the Chinese Communist Party. But it's seeing now that its ability to do anything is limited. Its influence when it comes to pressuring other countries from dealing with Taiwan is limited. And the CCP's strong-arm tactic of making threats, of scrambling jets and so on, this is demonstrating only the CCP's aggressive nature. It's pushing countries away from the Chinese Communist Party. And meanwhile, with some U.S. news, continuing what has been happening with Special Counsel Robert Mueller after it was revealed that his team wiped 22 devices before being asked to hand them over to the Justice Department for review. It's now been revealed that 44 of the Mueller team's iPhones had 0 records. Now, Mueller led the investigations into possible collusion between Trump and Russia in the 2016 elections, and the investigations into that have now shifted to possible wrongdoing by the investigators themselves, that the entire thing may have been a sham. This is now being looked into. Now, in this, former CIA Director John Brennan has now agreed to testify before Congress, as has former FBI Director James Comey. And House Democrats are calling for an emergency watchdog review now of U.S. Attorney John Durham's criminal investigation. Durham is looking into the FBI's counterintelligence probe in the Trump-Russia rumors. Now, what are we seeing here? While many people who were involved in this Trump-Russia scandal in terms of creating this whole rumor that spread across the whole United States and undermined the Trump presidency for most of his first term, many people who were involved with that are now being investigated. We'll have to see what happens with this, what comes out of it. But many individuals could possibly face charges for their involvement in that, especially if they did illegal spying, if they did things, for example, like withholding evidence while still carrying out the investigation. If they came to conclusive evidence, for example, like with the Mueller investigation, they would have really, say, undermined the entire nature of holding the investigation in the first place. People could face charges for that. We'll have to see how this unfolds, and again, we'll be covering it as it goes forward. Now, with that said, folks, we're again broadcasting 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. If you want to support us, as always, please join us on Patreon. You can find the link to our Patreon page in the description below. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. And as always, if you want to go the extra mile, please tell a friend or family member about Crossroads, and please consider sharing this video. Now, with that said, please take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and stay free.